There's a question I want you to sit with for a moment. Not answer, just sit with. When was the last time you paid for something and felt like you were being cheated, but paid anyway? Maybe it was a checked bag. Maybe it was a seat selection fee. Maybe it was that moment at the airport when you realized the ticket you bought for $47 was somehow going to cost you $160 by the time you got to the gate. And you paid it, because what were you going to do? Miss the flight? That feeling, that quiet, almost embarrassing surrender, that didn't happen by accident. Someone designed it. One man specifically. A man most people have never heard of. A man who looked at the airline industry and saw not a transportation business, but a psychology experiment. A man who figured out something that no one in the history of commercial aviation had dared to say out loud. People don't buy flights, they buy prices. His name was Baldanza, and before he died, 13 days before the airline he built collapsed into bankruptcy, he had already changed the way every company on earth charges you for everything. This is not a story about Spirit Airlines going broke. This is a story about one man who rewired the American consumer, and about the government that thought it could stop what he started, and in trying to stop it, may have made everything worse. Stay with me.
Baldanza didn't grow up dreaming about airplanes. He grew up thinking about numbers, about systems, about the invisible architecture underneath things that most people never bother to look at. He studied economics at Colgate University, got his MBA at Princeton, and spent his early career inside the machine rooms of the airline industry. American Airlines, US Airways, Continental, learning how the whole thing worked from the inside out. And what he saw troubled him. Not because the industry was broken, but because it was broken in a very specific, very avoidable way. Airlines were selling a product that most people didn't actually want at the price they were charging. They were bundling everything: the seat, the bag, the snack, the legroom, the smile of the flight attendant, into one number. And that number was high enough to keep millions of people on the ground who would have flown if only the price had been different. He saw something that the rest of the industry was too comfortable to see. The price wasn't the problem. The bundle was. In 2005, Baldanza walked into Spirit Airlines. At the time, Spirit was a mid-sized carrier out of Miramar, Florida. Not particularly impressive, not particularly troubled. It flew to vacation destinations. It filled seats. It existed. But Baldanza didn't see what was there. He saw what could be there. And in 2007, he made a decision that the airline industry is still arguing about today. He unbundled everything. The ticket became just the seat, nothing more. You want to bring a bag? That costs extra. You want to pick your seat? That costs extra. You want a drink of water? There was a moment, a real, documented moment, when Spirit charged for water on board. He stripped the product down to its most atomic form and priced everything else separately. The industry called it predatory. Passengers called it insulting. Consumer advocacy groups called it a trap. Baldanza called it honest. In July of 2010, Baldanza sat in front of a Senate subcommittee and did something that almost no CEO in the history of American aviation had done before. He told them they were wrong. Not politely, not with the careful language of someone who had been coached by lawyers for 3 weeks. He sat there, in that room full of elected officials who had come prepared to lecture him about hidden fees and consumer exploitation, and he looked at them and said, in effect, calmly, without raising his voice, that the people in that room were the ones hiding something. He said that the legacy airlines had been hiding fees inside ticket prices for decades, that every passenger who traveled light had been quietly subsidizing every passenger who checked 3 bags, that the bundle wasn't protection, it was concealment with better branding. The senators did not enjoy this. The public, watching from home, did not enjoy it either. But nobody in that room could find a clean, factual error in what he had just said. That was Baldanza. Not a man who softened things to make them easier to hear. A man who had decided, somewhere along the way, that the truth was more useful than the comfort, even when the truth made everyone in the room deeply uncomfortable, including the people he was theoretically trying to win over. He wasn't entirely wrong, and that's what makes this story so difficult to resolve cleanly. Because the model worked, spectacularly for a time. Spirit's profit margins in the early 2010s were the envy of an industry that had been hemorrhaging money for decades. In 2011, the year Spirit went public on the NASDAQ, the company was earning more per airplane than any other carrier in the United States. Not Southwest, not Delta, not American. Spirit. The yellow planes that everyone made fun of. By 2015, Spirit's net income was over $300 million. Its stock had touched $84 a share. The man who had been called the most hated CEO in aviation was quietly, methodically, building one of the most profitable airlines in American history. And nobody was paying attention to the right thing. Everyone was watching the angry passengers, the viral videos of people screaming at gate agents, the late-night jokes, the memes, the Reddit threads titled "Never Again." What nobody was watching, or at least not carefully enough, was what the big airlines were doing in the background. They were taking notes.
Delta launched basic economy in 2012. American followed. United followed. Within a decade, every major carrier in the United States had adopted some version of what Baldanza built. The unbundled ticket, the bag fee, the seat selection charge, the stripped-down fare that looks like a bargain until you add everything back. The man they called a villain had written the playbook that the entire industry was now running. But here's the thing about writing a playbook. Once everyone else has it, you've lost the only advantage you had. Spirit's model worked because Spirit's prices were genuinely lower. Not just nominally lower, structurally lower. The company operated with a cost per available seat mile that was 20 to 30% below the legacy carriers. That gap was a moat. That gap was a reason a family of 4 would endure the hard seats and the bag fees and the no-frills experience. Because even with all of it, the total bill was still less than flying anyone else. When Delta started offering basic economy fares at $15 above Spirit's base price, with a loyalty program, with rebooking flexibility, with an actual hub network, the moat started to narrow. Not collapse, not yet, but narrow. And Baldanza, who had spent a decade being called the man who ruined flying, began to look like something else entirely. He began to look like a man who had been right about the idea, but who had built the whole thing on a foundation that only worked when he was the only one doing it. There's a particular kind of loneliness in that. Building something that changes an industry, watching the industry absorb what you built, and then watching the walls close in. Not because you were wrong, but because you were first. He left Spirit in January of 2016, quietly. The board didn't renew his contract. No dramatic exit, no scandal. He just walked out of the thing he had built, and the world barely noticed. He went on to co-host a podcast about airlines. He gave talks, he wrote. He kept thinking about the industry the way he always had, from the inside out, looking at the invisible architecture underneath. In the summer of 2024, then Baldanza received the Wright Brothers Memorial Trophy, one of the highest honors in American aviation. The citation recognized his contribution to making air travel accessible to millions of Americans who had never flown before. He accepted the award. 5 months later, he was dead. ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a disease that takes everything slowly, methodically, piece by piece, not unlike what was happening to the airline that bore the marks of everything he had built. He died on November 5th, 2024. 13 days later, Spirit Airlines filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. He never knew, or maybe, and this is the part that stays with you, maybe he did. By 2022, Spirit Airlines was no longer a scrappy underdog. It was a target. The company had grown into the 7th largest airline in the United States. It was flying over 40 million passengers a year. Its bright yellow planes were everywhere. Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Las Vegas, Cancun, filling routes that the big carriers had long ignored because the margins were too thin. Spirit had made those routes work by being cheaper than anyone else was willing to be. And then, on February 5th, 2022, Frontier Airlines made an offer to buy Spirit. It was a reasonable deal, a merger of equals, more or less. 2 ultra-low-cost carriers combining forces, cutting costs, sharing routes. The logic was clean. Together they might actually build something big enough to compete with Delta and American and United on their own terms. But then JetBlue entered the room. JetBlue's offer was hostile. It was in cash, and it was higher. $33.50 per share, valuing Spirit at roughly $3.8 billion. JetBlue wanted Spirit's planes, Spirit's routes, Spirit's slots at key airports. It wanted to grow fast, and Spirit was the fastest way to do it. Spirit's board was conflicted. Some preferred Frontier, lower regulatory risk, cleaner path to approval. Others saw the JetBlue cash and heard the number. The shareholders voted. JetBlue won. And that decision, that single vote in the summer of 2022, set in motion a chain of events that would end with Spirit Airlines ceasing to exist entirely. Here's what you need to understand about what happened next. The United States Department of Justice filed suit to block the merger on March 7th, 2023. The argument was straightforward, at least on paper. Spirit was the most aggressive price competitor in the American aviation market. Wherever Spirit flew, fares dropped, not just on Spirit but on every airline operating that route. The government calculated that the merger would cost consumers nearly $1 billion in higher fares across more than 375 routes. The logic was not wrong. It was just incomplete, because the government's model assumed one thing that turned out not to be true, that Spirit would survive without the merger. The case went to trial in the District of Massachusetts. The judge was William G. Young, a Reagan appointee, 68 years old at the time, a man with a reputation for careful, methodical reasoning. He heard weeks of testimony. He read thousands of pages of documents. He weighed the evidence. And on January 16, 2024, he ruled against the merger. His opinion ran to over 150 pages. But the sentence that landed hardest was this. He wrote that blocking the merger was necessary to protect the markets of the United States and their participants from anti-competitive harm. He was protecting competition by eliminating a competitor. He meant well. That's the part that makes this complicated. Judge Young was not corrupt. He was not careless. He applied the law as written, with the evidence before him, and reached a conclusion that was legally defensible. But the law was written for a world where the company being protected would still be standing after the protection was applied. The day the ruling came down, Spirit stock fell 47%. Not dropped, fell. Nearly half its value. Gone. In one day. JetBlue formally abandoned the deal on March 4, 2024. And Spirit, which had just spent nearly 2 years in merger negotiations, bleeding legal fees, bleeding management attention, bleeding the confidence of its own employees and partners, was now alone, damaged, without a plan, carrying over $3 billion in long-term debt, and facing a market that had fundamentally changed when it was distracted. The big airlines had spent 2 years watching Spirit fight for its survival, and they had used that time well. Delta, American, United, they had all doubled down on basic economy. They had all gotten better at being cheap when they needed to be. They had all built loyalty programs, sophisticated enough to keep even price-sensitive customers inside their ecosystems. The gap between flying Spirit and flying Delta in basic economy had narrowed to something that felt, to a lot of passengers, like it wasn't worth the trade-off anymore. The hard seats, the fees for everything, the gate agents who, through no fault of their own, were the public face of a system designed to feel transactional and cold. People were choosing Delta, not because Delta was so much better, but because the difference in price no longer justified the difference in experience. I want you to stop for a second and feel the weight of that sequence. February 2022, a merger offer. July 2022, a better offer accepted. March 2023, the government files suit. January 2024, the merger is blocked. March 2024, JetBlue walks away. November 5th, 2024, Ben Baldanza dies. November 18th, 2024, Spirit files for bankruptcy. 2 years and 9 months. That's how long it took for a company that was flying over 40 million passengers a year to go from receiving a $3.8 billion acquisition offer to bankruptcy court. 2 years and 9 months of legal fees, of management distraction, of employees watching the news and wondering if they still had jobs, of partners pulling back, of passengers booking elsewhere just in case. 2 years and 9 months of slow bleeding, while every major competitor used the distraction to get stronger, cheaper, and better at doing the one thing Spirit had always done better than anyone else: being cheap enough to matter. Spirit tried everything. In the summer of 2024, they launched new bundled fares. Go savvy, go comfy, go big. They were trying, finally, to give passengers something that felt like a complete product. They were trying to stop being the airline everyone loved to hate. But you can't rebuild a brand in 6 months when you're running out of money. By November of 2024, Spirit had accumulated losses of roughly $2.5 billion since the start of the pandemic. Its debt was crushing. Its cash was evaporating. The engine problems on its newer aircraft, a manufacturing defect in Pratt & Whitney engines that grounded dozens of planes and cost the company hundreds of millions in compensation and lost revenue, had pushed an already fragile operation past its breaking point. On November 18, 2024, 13 days after Ben Baldanza died, Spirit Airlines filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company that had changed American aviation, the company that had taught the industry how to charge for everything, the company that had for a decade made flying accessible to people who had never been able to afford it before. Gone. Or so everyone thought. Spirit emerged from its first bankruptcy in March of 2025. The creditors took control. The debt was restructured. The company was supposed to have a second chance. It lasted 5 months. In August of 2025, Spirit filed for bankruptcy again. The same company, the same broken model, the same structural problem that no amount of debt restructuring could fix. Because the problem was never the debt. The problem was that the one thing Spirit had built its entire existence around, being cheaper than everyone else, was no longer true. And you cannot restructure your way out of an identity crisis. By May 2nd, 2026, it was over. Spirit Airlines ceased all operations. 17,000 employees lost their jobs. Passengers with tickets were stranded. The government, the same government that had blocked the merger to protect those passengers, coordinated an emergency response to rebook them on other airlines. The protection had arrived, just 18 months too late to matter. There's a word for this in economics. It's called a second-order effect. It means the unintended consequence of a decision that seemed correct at the time. The government looked at the merger and saw a threat to competition. What it didn't see, what its models couldn't account for, was that Spirit without a merger was not Spirit competing. It was Spirit dying slowly in public while everyone watched. Senator Elizabeth Warren called the collapse of Spirit a victory for consumers.
The Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, said something different. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I want to be precise, Spirit was in trouble long before the war with Iran, long before the fuel prices spiked. The model wasn't working. Blocking the merger removed the only exit that might have mattered. 2 people, 2 interpretations, both partially right, neither one willing to sit with the full weight of what that means, which is exactly where this story lives. Not in the verdict, not in the ruling, not in the bankruptcy filing or the stock price or the number of employees who lost their jobs. It lives in the question underneath all of those things. When a government tries to protect you from a bad deal, and in doing so leaves you with no deal at all, Who do you hold responsible? The system that failed? The man who built something that couldn't survive its own success? Or the institution that applied the right law to the wrong moment?
If you've made it this far into this video with me, I want to take just a second to say something directly. What we're doing here, sitting with uncomfortable questions, looking at the architecture underneath the things we think we understand. That's what this channel is about. Not headlines, not hot takes. The stuff underneath. If that's the kind of thinking you want more of, subscribe. We put out new videos regularly, and every single one is built the same way this one is. With care, with research, and with the intention of leaving you with something that actually stays with you. Now, here's the part of this story that nobody is saying out loud. Spirit Airlines is gone, but Spirit Airlines won. Think about that for a moment, because it sounds wrong, and then it sounds right, and then it sounds like something you need to sit with for a while before you decide what it actually means. Here is what Ben Baldanza built. Not the airline, but the idea beneath the airline. Before Spirit, the airline industry operated on a simple psychological contract with its passengers. You pay one price, you get one experience. The price was high enough to include everything: the bag, the seat, the snack, the blanket. The faint illusion that you were being taken care of. The bundle was the product. The bundle was also the lie, as Baldanza would say. But it was a comfortable lie. And comfort in consumer behavior is extraordinarily difficult to disrupt. Baldanza disrupted it. And once it was disrupted, it could never be put back together. Think about the last time you bought something online and felt genuinely surprised by the final price. Not the price that made you click, the price at the end. The hotel room that was $90 until the resort fee turned it into $140. The concert ticket that was $60 until the service fee, the facility fee, the order processing fee, and, my personal favorite, the fee to print your own ticket at home, on your own paper, using your own ink, made it $112. The streaming plan that was fine until it wasn't. And the thing you actually wanted to watch was on a different tier. You felt that. You paid it. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you knew exactly what was happening. And you did it anyway. That's not weakness. That's a model working exactly as designed. Ben Baldanza didn't just change how airlines charge. He proved something about human behavior that every company in America was watching very closely. He proved that people will tolerate a bad experience if the entry price is low enough. And once that was proven, really proven, with data, with load factors above 84%, with profit margins that embarrassed airlines 3 times Spirit's size, the idea didn't stay in the airport. It never had any intention of staying in the airport. You are living inside the model that Spirit built. Every checkout screen that shows you a number that isn't the number. Every booking flow designed to make the add-ons feel like choices. Every industry that learned, from watching one yellow airline in Florida, that the bundle was optional, and that what people really couldn't resist was a low number at the top of the page. By 2023, the 10 largest airlines in the world generated $54 billion in ancillary revenue. fees, extras, things that used to be included, things that passengers used to take for granted and now pay for, one by one, transaction by transaction, choice by choice. $54 billion. That number did not exist before Ben Baldanza built the model that created it. Delta alone earned over $3 billion in bag fees in 2023. American earned over $1 billion. United earned over $1 billion. These are airlines that spent years mocking Spirit's approach, and then quietly, methodically, built the same machine inside their own operations. The student became the teacher, and then the teacher died, and the students kept the lesson. Now, here is a question that nobody wants to ask out loud. Is this bad? And I want to be careful here, because the easy answer is yes. Of course it's bad. Hidden fees are bad. Surprise charges are bad. The feeling of being nickeled and dimed is bad. The erosion of trust between consumer and company is bad. But Baldanza's argument, the one he made in congressional testimony, the one he never stopped making until he couldn't speak anymore, was more nuanced than that. He said, when everything is bundled, the people who use less subsidize the people who use more. The passenger who travels light pays for the bag of the passenger who checks 3 suitcases. The subscriber who watches 2 hours a week pays for the infrastructure used by the person who streams 18 hours a day. The hotel guest who leaves early pays for the minibar habits of the guest in the next room. Bundling, he argued, is not fairness dressed up as convenience. It is redistribution dressed up as simplicity. And unbundling, for all its ugliness, for all the frustration it generates, for all the ways it has trained consumers to distrust every price they see, gives people something that bundling never did. A choice, a real one, not a theoretical one. The family that travels with one personal item and nothing else, they can fly for $40. That flight didn't exist before Spirit. That option didn't exist. That family stayed home, or drove 12 hours, or didn't go at all. Baldanza made them a customer of aviation. And then the industry absorbed the model, improved the technology, and priced that family out of the equation again. But this time with a better interface and a loyalty program that made them feel good about it. That's the part that stings. Not the fees, not the bankruptcy, not even the 17,000 jobs. The part that stings is that the model that was supposed to democratize air travel ended up being used by the largest players in the industry to extract more money from exactly the people it was designed to help. The tool became the trap, and the man who built the tool died before he could see what the trap had become. On May 2nd, 2026, at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, a dispatcher named Wes Egan sent a message through Spirit's internal crew communication system. He had worked there for 23 years. The message was short. It said, unofficially, "We stopped flying at 3 a.m. Eastern on May 2nd. That was it. No press release, no ceremony, no final flight with champagne and applause. Just a man who had spent 23 years routing planes through storms and delays and cancellations and 2 bankruptcies, typing a sentence into a system that would go dark a few hours later. I keep coming back to that image. Not the courtroom, not the stock chart, not the congressional hearing, or the merger negotiations, or the bankruptcy filing. Just a man, a keyboard, a message that nobody outside the building was supposed to see. That's how empires end, most of the time. Not with an explosion, with a sentence. Here's what I want to leave you with. Ben Baldanza built something that worked. It worked so well that the entire industry copied it. It worked so well that the idea outlived the company. It worked so well that you are still paying for it right now. Every time you book a flight, every time you reserve a hotel room, every time you buy a ticket to something and watch the total climb past what the number said when you started. The government tried to protect the consumer from a merger that would have eliminated the cheapest option in the market. The consumer lost the cheapest option anyway. Not through the merger, through the death of the company. And here's the thing that I think is worth sitting with. Not as a political statement, not as a verdict on anyone's intentions, just as a fact about how systems work when they get complicated enough. The people who made every decision in this story believed they were doing the right thing. Ben Baldanza believed he was making flying honest. The Department of Justice believed it was protecting competition. Judge Young believed he was applying the law correctly. JetBlue believed it was building something bigger than the sum of its parts. Spirit's board believed it was choosing the best path for its shareholders. Every single one of them was operating in good faith. And the result was 17,000 jobs lost. A company that had existed for over 60 years, erased from the market. And consumers in hundreds of cities left with fewer options and higher fares than they had before any of this started. Good faith is not the same as good outcomes. That's not cynicism. That's just how complexity works. There's a version of this story where Ben Baldanza is the villain, the man who made flying miserable, the man who taught corporations how to hide the real price of everything, the man whose ghost haunts every checkout screen that shows you a lower number than what you actually pay. There's another version where he's something closer to a prophet, a man who saw the lie inside the bundle before anyone else did. A man who said out loud what every other executive in the industry was thinking, but wouldn't say. A man who democratized something, imperfectly, uncomfortably, in a way that created as many problems as it solved, but democratized it nonetheless. Both versions are true. That's the version of the world I find most honest. Not the one where someone is purely right or purely wrong. The one where smart people make reasonable decisions, and the system produces outcomes that none of them intended, and all of them have to live with. Or in Baldanza's case, don't live with. He died 13 days before the end. He never saw the last message from the dispatcher. He never saw the empty gates. He never saw the 17,000 people walk out of a building carrying the things from their desks. Maybe that's mercy. Maybe that's the cruelest part of all. I don't know which one it is. I'm not sure it matters. What I do know is this. The next time you're at an airport, and you will be eventually, because flying didn't stop when Spirit stopped, look at the gate agent. Look at the departure board. Look at the price on your ticket and think about what it doesn't include. And think about the man who decided that the price should tell you the truth whether it did or not. That's for you to decide. If this video made you think, share it with 5 people who would sit with these questions the way you just did. Leave a comment below. Not a reaction, a thought. Tell me what you believe. Was the government right to block the merger? Was Baldanza a visionary or an architect of consumer frustration? And tell me what you want to explore next, because there are more stories like this one. More empires, more invisible architectures, more decisions made in good faith that produced outcomes nobody planned. We'll be here.